Got it. Super. Just a follow-up thought on that. I really like the way you said that the opportunity out there is like humongous. It just depends on which one you're sort of chasing, right? Now, all of us have 24 hours. You spend it in a different way. I spend it in a different way. There's no ideal way. But in India specifically, as much as I've been in the education sector, there are these so-called gurus who say, this is the time you wake up. This is what you do at this point in time, right? I want to know from your experience, because you've been following ultra learning and you've been teaching about that. Is there an ideal way of spending these 24 hours? If not, what is the take on that?
Let me preface this. So I think habits are really important. I mean, James Clear wrote the foreword to my book in his sort of phenomenal bestseller, Atomic Habits, is sort of built around this idea that habits are very important. And so I think habits are very important. However, that gets kind of distorted sometimes into the idea that what matters is the routine that you have, which I don't think it's that important. So the idea that like, oh, well, so-and-so was successful because they woke up at 5 a.m. every day. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, if those few hours in the morning, they were more productive, maybe that's what worked for them. But I mean, there's also people who that's not what they did at all, and they were successful. So I think the idea of like the link between routines and how much success you experience in life is really underdetermined. And I think it also misses, like, people imbue these things with a certain, almost like a mystical property that like, if you just wake up early enough, all the other things that are difficult about being successful at things or achieving things or whatever is going to go away. I don't think that's the case. I mean, again, waking up early, probably helpful if the rest of the day is busy and but it's very strategic. It's very much just something that you do to like accomplish a specific purpose. And so similarly, I think there's a lot of other things where people, they get into these ritualistic kind of ideas. And again, there's nothing wrong with rituals. I don't mistake me, but I think you don't want to imbue them in this significance that like the key to being successful is to just have all these sort of near superstitious rituals about like, okay, well, I meditate for 15 minutes and then I do this journaling for 15 minutes. And then I, sit here and do 3 Pomodoros and then like, this is how I'm going to be successful. And it's like, well, if that works for you, great. But I mean, what's going to determine whether you're successful is like, what is the content of the work you're doing, right? Is that effective? Like, who cares whether you do 15 minutes of meditation? I mean, if it makes you calm, if it makes you happy, great. But don't go too far, because I think sometimes there can be this idea that like, if you just get the right routine, I think, it's just one piece of the puzzle. But as I said, habits are very important. And I think the way they're very important is that we misjudge how effortful things are going to be in the long term, because as you do something over and over again, it reduces the effort cost. So some of that's related to learning and some of that's related to just habituation. And so I do think that there is a little bit of a cognitive illusion that when you imagine doing something in the beginning and imagine it's really effortful, it's really difficult, but then you do it over a long period of time and it stops being effortful. And so this causes us to misjudge our investments or the projects we undertake. I mean, even take the Year Without English project that I did with that, when I talk to people about that, they just have this idea that it's just going to be like the most grueling year-long grind. But the thing that's really hard to impress upon people is that after just, let's say 3 weeks, like Spanish, especially, Mandarin and Korean took a little longer, but let's say 3 weeks for Spanish, it was not difficult doing it. Now, that doesn't mean we were good after 3 weeks. I think that's also another like mistake is that, well, we were fluent in 3 weeks. No, it's just that the idea of living your entire life in Spanish after 3 weeks, when you're doing it that often, it's like, fish in water. You just don't notice it that much. I mean, you're probably making mistakes. There's probably lots of things you can't express, but you've kind of gotten into this comfort zone. And so I think that's something that is underappreciated, because if you were trying to imagine that and you let's say you even just accepted on face value that you think that method would work, and you're like, well, I don't have the energy to do that for 3 months, right? So I think this is where the habits play an important role. But I think, again, it's not like when we were on that trip, the fact that like, oh, I woke up at 7 a.m. and then, I did 20 minutes of meditation and I did 30 minutes of journaling. Like, that wasn't what those weren't the key ingredients that made that work. It was the speaking Spanish all the time. So I mean, I think that's the part that you have to really impress upon people.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there can be this sort of magical thinking as opposed to like, how much of the work are you doing? Are you getting the work done? Is it the right work to be working on? Other than that, I mean, those are the main questions. Everything else is just facility.
No, absolutely. I think what people forget is everything that they do is a means to an end. They forget the end and they just sort of focus on, okay, 15 minutes of journaling, X, Y, Z. They don't know why they're doing it. Even if they know, they probably don't evaluate that, right?
Well, I mean, again, don't get me wrong. Starting out habits, trying out habits, like experimenting with behaviors, it can be good. I just think the thing that I sort of worry about is this kind of maximalist philosophy where like that on its own is sort of enough. And I think that the risk there is that you're focusing on something, again, that's very underdetermined. Like how do you succeed at something very specific and difficult? Well, it's from doing very specific and difficult things, specific and difficult things. It's not, the habits might be good scaffolding to get you there, but just understand like that's what they're doing, is that they're scaffolding. They're not replacing the work, or they're not, there's nothing magical about it. I guess that my point is just like, I'm just sick of reading articles about like, Warren Buffett's like breakfast routine or something like that. Like who cares what Warren Buffett?
That's why I asked you the question.
Like he's not. It's not because like he has a Diet Coke or whatever. He has a Coke for lunch every day. That's like one of these like little like Warren Buffett tidbits people like trot out. But it's like who cares? Who cares? He's clearly a successful investor because he knows a lot about investing.
Correct.
And he's really skilled at it in a way that is difficult to replicate. So I mean, this again. Yeah, having good routines probably helpful, but I mean, let's not crystal ball it and like try to say like, okay, well, what is the specific Warren Buffett routine that's going to make me equally successful? I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's a little, it can get to an absurd degree if you take it too far.
That is true. No, absolutely. I think you've hit the right point by giving the example itself.